Hey everybody, it's Retro DM Ray. Hey, I wanted to just come to you now and kind of show you just a few things on the table of kind of what I'm going to be talking about. You noticed on one of my shorts some different books there that we use as a family when we play, to where I get to play and not run all the time, and we all get to play together. And so I just wanted to show you some stuff here. You have White Box up there in the corner, which we really like. You have the two table fables, which are just really awesome books of tables. You got to check them out for yourself, and I'll be taking a look at them here soon. You have Arcane Artifacts and Curious Curios. Again, all three of these are by Madeline Hale. And then you have all four of these Book of Random tables by Matt Davids. They're really, really good with tables to generate too. So what we do really is we would have our characters start out in a typical village or hamlet or a city or someplace out in the wilds. And then we would create our characters in the particular system we're going to use, whether it be straight white box or maybe it's white box and basic fantasy kind of fused together. And we would create our characters, and then what we would do is link our characters together just by talking around the table and maybe rolling on some of the tables in the table Fables 1 and 2, and maybe in these Book of Random tables. We might even generate character names and those types of things, maybe even a little bit of information that we could use for background in those random tables. And then once we do that, then we would leave off to explore, and that's where these come into play here and here. These are the pieces for Wrath of Ashardalon and Temple of Elemental Evil boxed sets. They have some other particular pieces that go with it. And what they're good for are things like, let's say we go down below ground and we find a crypt or something like that, and you would generate that random place where you're going to be going. So this is similar to a sandbox or a hex crawl type of a game, and you would generate that place. And then, so let's say it's a particular crypt, we go to investigate the crypt. So this would be our first tile, for example, that we might lay down, and you could situate it however you wanted to get started. And then once you have gone a little ways on that tile there, then you would have these setting upside down here to the side, these dungeon tiles, and then one person would roll, we would all roll a d20 to see who gets to draw, and then one person would draw, and they would flip that tile over and get to place it wherever it is that they wanted to as their connection to whatever part of the map to continue that map in whatever direction that they think that map, they might want that map to go. So, for example, let's say someone drew this particular tile. They would place that tile down right here, and then that would get them the next section of that underground crypt. Now, during this time, we would, of course, use the original Table Fables 1 and 2, and I would use the original rules where we would roll 2d6 to roll for an encounter, and on a 1 or a 2 on those 2d6, or maybe even 1d6 would indicate an encounter of some sort. We would then roll on Table Fables 1 or 2, maybe even in White Box if it was a monster encounter. Maybe it was a random table from one of Matt David's books here, and we would insert that encounter here in this next tile that was just added as we continue to investigate. That encounter could be a trap, could be a trick of some sort, could be an object, could be a monster of some sort as an encounter, could be an NPC as that encounter. And we would continue that until, for example, we would then get to an end tile like this that would end that particular section of the wall. And let's say we had that one there. And then we would go down, and let's say they found another one, we would have that one there. So we know that this crypt is going to discontinue this direction based upon those tile draws. And that's kind of how we play using these products. And then if we roll an encounter that sounds particularly interesting, I have many different PDF books that I would use that would have some random layers. Book of Layers 1, Book of Layers 2 from back in the old days. I also have some online 5e Book of Layers made by different companies that are in PDF form that I might use. There are some good things in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide that you might be able to take a look at to generate those types of encounters. Because again, since this is a sandbox and a hex crawl type of activity, we're going to be also generating stuff like when we're outside, what's the weather like? And when we're inside, what's the environment like inside? What are some unique or curious items that maybe we find while we're going through this particular process of laying down tiles and investigating around? And then what are the treasures that we find there within? Obviously, the creatures here might have a treasure. This might generate treasures. We might have them here. You have random treasure tables for monsters in Basic Fantasy RPG. You have a bunch of different older first edition, second edition, even basic treasure type tables that you could roll on to generate a random treasure. And so that's what we do when we go through each and every time. And then I typically like to use this older school stuff because it's just so much simpler. The White Boxes uses a D6 for pretty much everything, other than your D20 roll, of course. And so that keeps it very simple. Basic Fantasy uses all of the dice, but again, it's just at a very basic rules light level, OSR level, which is the easiest way to play this, I believe. If you add more rules, it complicates the situation, makes it more and more difficult to be able to randomly generate and crawl, and makes it more prep work on the front end. And we don't want prep work. We want to run it more like if we were playing the dungeon board game, for example. And actually, the dungeon board game is kind of an impetus for us that if we do get into a dungeon environment and we decide we don't want to draw tiles, we decide we'd like to be in a particular dungeon, and maybe that's a huge like mega dungeon below ground or something like that, then we might pull out the board for the dungeon board game and we might go through that. And so there's a bunch of different options you can use. I know the 5e book that I presented on the short video of layers, that has little short 1 to 2 paragraph, maybe just one single page bits of information that it gives you as to what are the what is it you are encountering? So for example, there might be a kobold lair, so it'll tell you about those kobolds and why they're there just a little bit, and what's going on there, and what's the hook to get you involved with encountering those kobolds, and how that encounter could possibly play out. What are the treasures they have? What is their particular agenda for being there, and how could that hook into or lead into another particular adventure? But we haven't used those very much yet because just the idea of crawling across hexes both above ground and below ground has been really, really fun. And it's really, really easy. And it's easy for us to all play. There's no dungeon master. The tables and the dice are the dungeon master. So it makes it really, really unique in that particular aspect. And it makes it really fun for me because, like I said, I get to play. As time goes by on this channel, what I will probably do is take a look at some of the tables in Fables 1 and 2, take a look at some of the stuff in White Box and stuff in the Arcane Artifacts and Curious Curios and some of these Matt David's random book tables, and kind of present that to you to fill in more of the details about what some of these tables look like and how they work as we roll on them and go through this stuff at the table with each other. Also, I'll take a look at some of the tables that are in Basic Fantasy, and we might even take a look at some of the tables that are in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide to kind of help with this. To kind of give you an idea of various different places we draw this information. Also, I will suggest to you an online resource that is just really, really cool for hex crawling and sandbox style games play like this is Donjon. If you haven't found that yet, do a Google search for Donjon. He has got they've just put together such a wonderful amount of information to randomly generate things for your game. You can randomly generate weather and stuff right down to that particular day. You can generate encounters. You can determine difficulties for those encounters, and you can use various different systems on there. So Donjon is a really, really cool resource. I would highly recommend. Also, I know Matt Finch has a video on doing hex crawling and sandbox stuff like this with an interview with Bill Williams. They have some really cool insights about how they do that particular stuff. Although I will say Matt Finch's videos are often not G-rated, so I can't highly recommend them, but the information in there is good to use to understand what a hex crawl really is, what a sandbox style play really is. And if we were going to go into much larger detail on a particular hex crawl, and we were going to do it for a prolonged period of time, then of course we would actually have a hex map, and we would generate all this stuff randomly, and then we'd color it in or draw it out on a particular hex map, and then we'd travel with our characters across there. Now, when we play at the table, I have a television that we elevate up on stands so that we can use 3D electronic battle maps for some of our games and for a regular campaign that I run, and my wife does too. But we can also use that as a play surface to fold out a dry erase map, one side of which is wilderness, the other side of which is like a dungeon or a castle or stone flooring type of an encounter area that you could use. And we will use that to then do our 5-foot squares for miniature movement and placement and stuff like that when we're actually having these encounters. You can also place your miniatures right here, as you can see on these spots here on the particular tiles themselves. And just to give you an example, they are a perfect fit for miniatures right there, so that you can see, you can do facing if that's something that's important to you when you're playing, if you're not doing complete theater of mind or you're doing partial or whatever. So that gives you your idea of miniatures and movement. And all of these have that, which is, an excellent way to be able to utilize those for that particular purpose as well. We try to limit our ability or limit the influence of any one of us making any particular major decisions, but we will often roll on tables and then find that sometimes those random tables will connect to like a common thread of something we were all thinking about. And so that generated like this white noise of creativity or imagination. We're like, oh yeah, that table says this. Well, hey, what about this and this that happened back there? And you can kind of brainstorm together at the table with each other as you're doing this. And kind of write your own story. And again, there's no dungeon master. I think once this COVID thing started, if you're not an online player, I'm not much of that. I don't really care for that. And it's hard for you to get together physically in person with anyone, and you want to play with your family right there at the house, but you don't want to run everything all of the time. I think this is a great way to be able to do that, and it's a great way to be able to just have those creative juices just flow out of the randomness of kind of the minutia of those tables and how you're using those and rolling those together with each other, and then how you're able to just like randomly pick up and draw out tiles. Taking a look at that tile right there, not using the name, you can just see what kind of things that might spur in your imagination, like, oh wow, wonder what that is right there. Maybe that's some sort of angelic being or something there on the altar. Maybe there's someone that's buried there that was perhaps a powerful priest of an angelic being, or that angelic being is representative of their deity, or what have you. And maybe those runic markings on the floor are of that particular strange god of yesteryear or something like that. So those are just ways in which, even when you're laying the tile down, it gives you unique ideas that you come up with as you're laying them down and looking at those. I just think that's a really cool way to be able to do it together with each other at the table. Like I said, coming here soon will be some of the videos that I'll kind of take a look at some of these unique tables in these particular books if you haven't seen them before. And we'll take a look at some stuff in White Box. We'll take a look at some of these random tables in Matt David's books, and we'll kind of talk about that kind of a thing. I'm not very able to do things where I can show you my screen when I'm on the PC, so I won't be able to do any PDFs and those kinds of things for you. So I apologize for that. But I will be able to pull some things up and maybe just read off of that for you, so that if you have a physical copy or you have the PDF, you can maybe follow along with some of those other things as well. But I would encourage you, if you can pick up Wrath of Ashardalon, if you can pick up Temple of Elemental Evil and these dungeon tiles for that, this is a great way to do this together with each other as a group at the table. Again, I would highly suggest Rules Light systems for this. OSR works great for this, but I would highly suggest that, as it makes it so much easier to do, so much less work on anyone's part, and so much of the hands-off, so that you can all be playing and there really isn't truly a dungeon master at the table. I just think that's really cool. Those opportunities are hard to come by for certain. You can do that on the computer games and console games and stuff like that, but that's not really my thing. I'm a tabletop role-playing game guy, of course. So if you like this video, if you like the content, please like, subscribe, share with friends and family. Again, it's always G-rated. No other junk in here. We're just talking old school gaming, and that's it. Please, again, don't post anything in the comments that are not G-rated. Don't post anything that's, political or social or cultural or any of that mess. I'll delete all of that stuff. But otherwise, share stuff in the comments. Share your thoughts about the things that I've talked about today. Any things you could suggest to add to it, or maybe to take away from it, or your thoughts about these particular ways in which we do this together. And then hang on, like I said, we're going to be having some more stuff coming here soon, and I'll show some screenshots of some tables, or maybe I'll sit down at the table and we'll go through the book together for each one of these books. And take a look at this stuff in a little bit more in depth for you. I won't show you everything, because I would encourage you to pick these things up for yourself. But I will show you these little bits of these things as we go along here in the future. Again, like, subscribe, share. Take a look at the stuff in the description for the PayPal and the Patreon and all that kind of stuff. Remember, there's still the offer out there to do a play-by-post, play-by-email game with me. I've got that on Smoldering Wizard as well as I've got a Reddit, both of which are under Retro DM Ray. Take a look at those. And again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for everybody following along and subscribing. We're above 320 subscribers, so that's just super cool and really amazing to me that anybody would even want to listen to an old guy like me just carrying on about OSR stuff. But it's really, really cool, and I appreciate y'all. Thank you very much. And as I always say in all my videos, hey, may all your rolls be nat 20s. Take care. Bye.